that place holds like 250 people legally. We get there and there's a line like half a mile down the street. And we're like, fuck. So we just like, all right, well, we'll play twice.
Welcome, everyone, to This Was The Scene, the podcast that takes a look back at the late 90s, early 2000 punk scene. I am your host, Mike Doyle. Dan Yemin is known for playing in bands such as Lifetime, Kid Dynamite, and Painted Black. If you don't know who he is, then I don't know why the fuck you're listening to this podcast. I first learned about Lifetime when I picked up a copy of Hello Bastards in like 97 at a local show in Jersey. However, I wasn't 100% ready for the sound and ended up loving the record years later when my tastes evolved outside of the whole fat record realm. And then I got Jersey's Best Dancers years later, which I will argue is the best Lifetime record. I mean, I'm not saying that Hello Bastards isn't great. I'm just saying that Jersey's Best Dancers is my most favorite fucking record out of the three that they've put out. And to this day, Truth About Lars is my all-time fucking favorite song. And when they played this in their 2005 reunion show, I basically lost my mind and decided to grab Thursday's guitarist Steve Padula, who I didn't even know personally. I grabbed him by his shirt and started shaking him uncontrollably because I was that excited. And I remember his face, he just kind of looked at me, he was just like laughing, like, what the fuck are you doing? So if you were at that show, you probably remember how amazing that reunion was, because I was waiting for that for about, what the fuck, almost like, was that 9 years at that point? Because they broke up in 96. So I was very excited, and I obviously expressed that on Poor Steve. Big thank you to Brian Mcgee from Plow United for the intro to Mr. Yemin. If you want to check out Brian's episode, it's episode 41, which you can listen to after this one, and then you can just listen to other episodes of other interviews I've done if you'd like to do so as well. After weeks of scheduling, Dan and I finally figured out some time to chat, and this is what we talked about. Oktopus co-producing Painted Black's album New Lexicon, using a flyer to start Lifetime, when they finally found their sound, somewhere in the swamps of Jersey, their reunion show in 2005, the Melody Bar, forming Painted Black, and a ton more. Go check out his latest band, Open City, which is on Spotify. Real quick before we start, if you want to support the podcast, you can do it in three ways. You can either buy some merch, you can do a one-time donation, or you can do $1 a month through Patreon, which I've said many times is like buying 3 cups of Starbucks coffee this year. All these things you could do by going to thiswasthescene.com. If you have any feedback, you can email me at thiswasthescene@gmail.com, and that's all I'm thinking about right now. And lastly, make sure you wash your hands, because that's what I'm being told is going to keep this thing from killing every single person on the planet. Feel free to subscribe, leave a review, and share this with anyone who would love some punk rock nostalgia. With that said, let's get started. So you got like 45 minutes for your drive, or is it less?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. About 45.
Cool, man. It's funny because I was just like, I'm gonna keep it. Sometimes these things can go to be like 2 hours, but I've had the shortest interview I did was with Lewis from Hopeless. It was 30 minutes, and I was like ended it on the dot. So I'm gonna be very aware of the time.
Okay.
But it was funny leading up to this. I was just watching 4 Years in One Gulp on
Oh, wow.
YouTube right now. Dude, Dave and Colin are like two of the funniest fucking people. Like,
Oh my God. Yeah. They're like, they made that whole thing. I mean, without it, I'm not sure. Without them, I'm not sure what the point of it would have been in terms of watchability.
I don't know. I love the whole thing because I like getting the behind the scenes background. I love the fact that Jason was like he put the whole thing together because like for me I do video production. I do like animation stuff with After Effects and video production. So, but
cool.
yeah, but like watching that, I remember seeing you guys. I'm gonna kind of jump around. I'm gonna structure this more where I'm gonna go back and talk about how you got into music, how you got into punk, how that led into getting the Lifetime, and then talk a little bit about Kid Dynamite, maybe a little Painted Black. But
Okay.
it was funny because when you guys got back together in 2005, I went to the Asbury show at the Stone Pony. And we got there after, I think there was like the Loved Ones played, and then Bouncing Souls, and then you guys. And I remember you got on stage, like when you guys got on stage, you were like, "Thanks to the Loved Ones for making me a believer." And I don't know, had you seen them play prior to that?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I met Dave at the first Kid Dynamite show, and we became really good friends really quick. He roadied for Kid Dynamite, so I spent a lot of time with him. So yeah, I mean, I saw the Loved Ones from the beginning.
Yeah, that was just funny because like right after that is when they just took off, which was awesome to see. Because especially
Yeah.
even though I missed them at that show, which was, I mean, I am definitely a huge Lifetime fan, and that was when you guys got back together, and when we went to that show. I remember driving to it. I was like, I can't believe this is finally fucking happening because you guys broke it up in '97, and I was like, nobody move wrong because something's gonna fuck this up.
It's kind of how I felt too.
But yeah, man. So all right, so we got a short amount of time. Yeah, the whole structure of this is I used to play in a band in Jersey, like got in the scene in like '97. I started this whole podcast talking about that whole scene, and it was Jersey focused. And then about 30 episodes in, I started branching out and talking to the bands who influenced us. You guys were a huge band that influenced me because I got into you after we started playing in the shows. I got Hello Bastards at like a show we played in, I think it was like Wharton at a Legion Hall in Wharton, New Jersey. And
Okay.
some guy was just selling CDs, and I picked up Hello Bastards, and that was when I started branching out of like the No Effects and Lagwagon bands and shit like that.
That was your gateway, like the Fat Records kind of bands.
Yeah, like it was I was more into like metal bands and stuff. My friends got me. They were started with Face to Face and then Lagwagon. And then they would,
Well, and Lagwagon's a good crossover band for metal kids because they're so like they got that goofy technical thing going on, where you're like, oh, you like Iron Maiden just as much as you like No Effects. I got it.
yeah, you like shredding solos. Check out Duh. So yeah, like I said, the way it's structured is I really want to just find out, kind of go back in time and talk about like what you got into music, why you got in the scene, and things like that. But let's start with that. Like when you were younger, what was like that moment where you saw something on MTV or you heard a song where you're like, music just caught your attention?
I mean, music caught my attention the first time I was in somebody's car in like second grade, maybe, where there was like radio, like normal radio, like rock radio. Um, because my parents only listened to classical music, and so I had no reference point for anything else. And then at some point, I remember being 7 or 8, being in a car, and somebody had like, normal people radio on, not what my parents listened to,
Yeah.
and just being like there was stuff that was catchy. And then I think the first thing that was like exciting was probably Kiss. And the first record I bought with my own money was the first Kiss album.
What was it about it? Like, was it the lyrics? Was it the melody? Was it like, I don't know, guitars?
It was like the guitar, it was the heaviness of it, definitely. And then for Kiss specifically, it was the whole mythology they created as like the sort of understructure of the band, like that these weren't like people. They were like one guy was an alien and one guy was a demon, and like I just kind of got into that. Uh, I was kind of captured by the mythology around it, but the heaviness definitely.
Was that something like, was there something about that heavy sound when you got into like punk rock? What was like your transition? Was it like a punk band or was it a hardcore band that got you into like the scene?
Definitely a punk band. I think I was I was into what was I into? And then there's a period where I was really into, I was really into the Who and Led Zeppelin, like any guy that played guitar in the late '70s, early '80s. I really liked the Cars. They were kind of on pop radio and rock radio,
Yeah.
and they had like a new wave vibe and like a really cool uh, guitar thing going on. And then the guy's voice was kind of creepy and sinister too, and that was kind of mesmerizing. And then I got really into um, like progressive rock, I guess, like Yes and Rush. Really into those bands. And then I was in a band in, I guess, eighth grade maybe, that played covers and battled the band stuff at the middle school, at the junior high. And the other kids from our school that played guitar and had a band and were much cooler than us, we basically played songs that were basically the unifying thread was like we could pull them off technically, so they weren't that challenging, And there's some Cars, some Rolling Stones, some Who, and the other band from our school that was playing at this Battle of the Bands. Those were all the cooler kids that had cool older brothers that got them into shit, and they were playing Clash songs, and I was like, wow, these guys are doing something much more interesting than what we're doing.
What do you mean?
And
Like,
so,
was it about like it was less technical, or was it like the sound
no,
more?
it was just, it just grabbed me. Um, some of it was, some of it was that the bass kind of carried a lot of the melody. So I remember specifically they were playing Clash songs and songs by the Jam, and so the bass was really carrying a lot of the melody and kind of creating a lot of the propulsion of the song. And then something about that grabbed me, like the bass line that opens London Calling, the bass line that opens In the City by the Clash. I mean, I'm sorry, In the City by the Jam. Something about that grabbed me, and I was just wanted to know more. I didn't have an older brother that was turning me on to cool stuff, so um, I just started digging into that, talking to those kids about what they were into. Really quickly from there, found college radio, which was really, really important at the time. And so this is like eighth grade. So let me think. Let me do the math here.
A while ago.
1982. It's
1982.
1982.
Okay.
And and I found well Rutgers, the Rutgers radio station, WRSU. And there was one that I don't think exists anymore. It was like Staten Island College. It was WSIA. I still remember it was 89.9,
Oh yeah.
and WRSU was I should know this.
Was it like
88.7, 88.7,
was that or 88.1? I th
88.7.
Okay. I think I remember listening to that. Yeah.
And I would come home after school and put a cassette in and just and hit record and then go out and play. And then I'd come home and listen to it. Like I should have been studying math, but I was just studying these tapes that I was making from college radio. And I'd just sit there with a pen and a pad and wait for the DJ to come on and say what he'd played. And then I'd go find that stuff at the record store in our town, which is called the Music Staff. The early things were first couple of Clash records, the first Generation X record. I remember Kiss Me Deadly was on one of those tapes, and that song fucking blew my mind. Husker Du, um, which was the record at the time, was Metal Circus, was had just come out, and then of course Minor Threat. Minor Threat kind of grabbed me, but that was all over once I heard Minor Threat. It was Sob Story from the Out of Step record. Everything about it just, I mean, ruined my life, and it's still being ruined. Uh, Everything about it was like everything I still love about hardcore, like the speed, the intensity, the attitude, like the sarcasm, like the dynamics, like the punches, like the hits, the fact the bass kind of is what made it heavy, which is a thing I think a lot of hardcore people miss. That it's not the guitar really that makes it heavy. And just then that song ends with like he's basically talking about like a friend that is like the worst complainer in the world, and it ends with like the music stops and he's just like boo fucking who, and I was just like I was smitten. That was it for me.
I like that. Yeah, it's like those are the kind of bands where like Kiss was so polished and Yes was so polished. When these bands came and they broke away from that, you're like, oh, you're allowed to do that? You're allowed to be fucking
Yeah,
like real with this shit?
exactly. No it's stripped of pretense. It was just like thrilling, totally thrilling. Also on one of those early tapes, Suicidal Tendencies. Yeah, and so then I just started hunting stuff down.
You know, it's funny. I was doing a bunch of research and I didn't know that It's Not Funny Anymore was a Husker Du cover that you guys
Oh
did.
yeah,
I just learned that today.
it's from the record that I mentioned earlier. It's on Metal Circus, which is one of the best hardcore records ever.
It's so weird. Yeah, it's so weird that like how many decades later I just figured that out today. I was like, wow, I'm so glad I knew that.
They were also the first hardcore band that was really like melodic. It's sort of in my version of history, at least. They are. Somebody's probably going to call up and dispute me on that, but to me, they were the first hardcore band that was melodic.
Was there something about that, like, because I mean, all the bands you've been in between like Lifetime, Kid Dynamite, even like Painted Black, like Painted Black was more stripped down. It was like way more stripped
Yeah,
down. But then like towards like the second album, there was definitely, I think the melody came more from the guitar and the music.
yeah, yeah. I couldn't. I have trouble staying away from it. I mean, like, no matter what I do, like Painted Black. Initially, I wanted to sound like Los Crudos, and I'm not good at keeping melody out of it for some reason.
Well, I think it's worked out for you.
It's worked out pretty well.
Yeah.
But someday I would like to do a band that's totally just primitive and aggressive with not a hint of melody.
Yeah, but I think that's like seems like when you started Painted Black, that was the initial theme. Because when you did CVA, I feel like that started off like that. But I think it was like Atticus Finch is where it started to get some kind of melody, or there was something about that song that stood out to me.
There's some song, I think it's Womb Envy, where it gets its melody. Like the first couple songs are just like mean, and then like I couldn't, at the very least, I couldn't help from like letting a sort of a Gorilla Biscuits vibe get in there. And then as we changed kind of the idea of what Painted Black was meant to be, it just started incorporating all these other influences, not even necessarily from hardcore, but some of them were melodic.
Yeah, and then like when you guys did Paradise, I know I'm kind of jumping around, but didn't you guys do this? It was like a studio. There was something with hip hop was involved with that, or like
That was the next record. That was New Lexicon,
that was it.
the third LP. Yeah,
Yeah, it's like something about that. Like, what was it? How it was produced? Who was produced it? Or
yeah. Well, we had two different people produce it. We recorded all the instruments with Jay Robbins down in Baltimore. He's the one who did Paradise also. And that's Jay Robbins, who was in like Jawbox and Government Issue and Burning Airlines, and he's a producer and he has a studio down there. I really wanted to do something like that was more of a radical departure, and but still be hardcore. There's this, I guess, for lack of a better word, kind of an indie hip hop group called Dalek, Dalek, and it was like an MC and a producer, and the producer made all the beats. They were like a really dark, almost like if you sampled like Godflesh and My Bloody Valentine to make hip hop beats. That's kind of what they sound like. I mean, that's the closest I could get quickly.
okay,
But the producer did the guy who did all the beats. I knew from the hardcore scene. He used to play in like a band that were played with Lifetime in the early days, and so I was still in touch with him. And he had actually recorded some Lifetime songs for like compilations in the like mid '90s. And I was a big fan of this hip hop group, and the sonic landscapes that they painted were like amazing and apocalyptic. And I was like, can we do something where we record a record that sounds like us, and then you like deconstruct it, and like we give you all the tracks, and you just like do something with it, like sample, like build soundscapes, interludes. You could put stuff in the songs or between the songs. I don't really care. But like use the stuff we recorded as source material for sampling,
damn.
and like build something different out of it. And so both Jay and Oktopus, was his name, loved the idea, and we're down to like share production responsibilities and credits, and kind of just be open to not being fully in control of something they were recording.
Yeah.
And it was like one of the most exciting things I was involved with. So
It almost kind of
it's
reminds
cool.
me of like when I'm gonna jump off this in a second, but like when Wugazi came out, when the guy
Yeah.
sampled Fugazi and Wu
Oh yeah.
Tang, that was like one
I
of the
love that record.
sickest fucking albums. I love that so much. Yeah, it reminded me of that when you did that. I was like, holy shit, this is like this weird crossover here. God, this is so crazy because like I have such a short amount of time. I have so many questions. I'm just gonna like cram so many in. But
Okay.
so I usually will go into like how you got into the scene and things like that. But like I really want to transition to Lifetime because there's so many directions we can go with this and like talk
Yeah.
about that in different and Dynamite. So like, so you grew up in Jersey and Ari grew up in Jersey, right?
Yeah.
And you guys met and formed Lifetime.
Yes.
How'd that happen?
Well, I just graduated college, I was in Ann Arbor, Michigan from '86 to '90, and um, never was able to find anybody to play with there for anything that really, like, nothing. I found people to play with, but nothing that developed into something I was excited about. I was going to every show I possibly could, and then when I was home for the summer, I would go to shows in New Jersey and New York City. And then I graduated in 1990, and I came home staying with my folks, and I just put, it's pre-internet, so I put up a flyer in the record store, which is in Woodbridge, called Vintage Vinyl.
Yeah.
It's still there, I
Yeah.
think.
I think it is. Yeah.
Yeah, and so it just said, like, I want to do a hardcore band with these influences. And amongst them were, like, Dag Nasty and Verbal Assault. Actually, the person who called me first was Rob Fish, who from, he sings for 108 and Resurrection.
Okay. Yeah.
But he had been in a straight edge band called Release that had just broken up. And he and Ari were really close friends. They'd known each other since middle school. Rob called me because he was interested in doing something melodic, but he couldn't really sing. And Ari had been a drummer in a bunch of bands, a bunch of, like, straight edge bands, and he was telling Rob how he wanted to try singing for a band that was, like, melodic but also heavy. And Rob was like, "Yo, that's crazy, because I just talked to this kid who put up a flyer in Vintage Vinyl, and he gave Ari the flyer, or he gave Ari the number, and Ari got in touch." The real dirt is that Rob. So I had demoed a bunch of songs. I had a 4-track recorder, and I had demoed a bunch of songs. I was like, if you want to see what you can come up with, like, take the 4-track and my microphone, and, like, the songs were demoed with, like, a drum machine, bass, and guitars. It's like 6 songs. I was like, if you want to see what you can come up with, just take the stuff. And then he disappeared for like 2 months and didn't return my calls. And then the next thing I know, I get a call from Ari, and I'd all but given up on that stuff. And Rob had passed that stuff on to him, and I eventually got my stuff back from Rob. But for a minute, I thought he had just robbed me. So Ari and I connected, and we became friends. We hit it off pretty quick and talked about music. And I would go down to his mom's apartment in Edison with my stuff. Like, I'd carry my amp up to his room, and we'd just, like, work on. I'd just show him stuff that I was coming up with, and we'd listen to records and talk about. I'd turn him on to stuff I liked and he'd turn me on to stuff that he liked that I didn't know. And it's just an exciting time. He pushed me really hard. Like, he was like, he would always be like, I think you can come up with something better or more interesting.
So were you guys, like, both, like, the main writers for all the albums?
There were always Ari always wrote all the vocals. Scott St. Hilaire, who was in Lifetime until, like, 1992, we both wrote the songs. He and I probably both wrote equal number of songs on the first 7-inch album. And then he and the bass player left after that first tour. And then Pete joined. Pete was someone I knew from my hometown. Soon after that, Dave joined on bass, and Dave wrote a lot of songs too. So Lifetime wrote pretty collaboratively.
Was this all around the time of, like, Background?
That was the first record. I mean, that was me, Ari, Scott St. Hilaire, Justin Janish on bass, Chris Corvino. Actually, I'm sorry. The first lineup was me on guitar, Scott St. Hilaire on guitar, Chris Daly on drums, Ari on vocals, and Chris Corvino, Crispy, on bass. Chris went on to form. Chris left the band after the first 7-inch, and he went on to form Dead Guy, and I think he wrote most of the music for Dead Guy. That was a pretty big hardcore band out of New Jersey, also featuring Tim Singer, who I graduated high school with, and who used to do pretty influential 80s hardcore zine called Boiling Point. So, but that's Dead Guy. So Crispy leaves after the 7-inch. Justin Janish joins. I don't remember how we met him, but he's a really good bass player. And then we did the background. We went through a bunch of drummers, Ended up with Dave Wagonshoots, who moved out from St. Louis to be in the band because he really loved the first 7-inch. And we met him through Mike Hartsfield, who did New Age Records, who put out our first couple records. This is probably getting pretty convoluted, but then after the first tour, Scott and Justin leave, and then I asked Pete to join, he and I are from the same hometown, and until I met Ari, he and I were each other's only like punk friends. Like there was a show and he had to work, I went alone. And if there was a show and I had to work, he went alone. Otherwise, we went to shows every show we could get to together, and constant trips to the record store.
Were these all local shows, or were these like you heading up to like New York City and Philly and all that?
It was mostly City Gardens and Trenton. We didn't go to Philly. Philly in the 80s had a rep for being the scariest place. Trenton, the venue in Trenton, City Gardens, had a Nazi skinhead, let's say a not insignificant Nazi skinhead problem.
Jesus.
But Philly, the reputation was that Philly was even worse. I don't know if that was true. I ended up moving there a few years later, but this is the 80s. So we went to City Gardens in Trenton. We went to CBGB's in New York, obviously, and then the Anthrax in Connecticut were mostly where we went.
Were you ever like a guy who actually, because I mean, I've been to shows and seen so many videos of you guys playing where you're on stage and people are like going fucking nuts and jumping on the stage. Were you ever that guy you're at a show watching a band and you're the one jumping on stage, or you're in the front row?
In the front row, yeah, not jumping on stage.
Yeah.
No. And I'm definitely not moshing. I don't like to get hit, really. I'd be the dude up front singing along, and then only once I got to know Ari and got a little more comfortable in my surroundings, because he knew everybody in New Jersey. It wasn't until I started going to shows with Ari in like 90 and 91 that I started stage diving.
Interesting.
And yeah.
So you going from like, I know I'm totally just like skipping out a lot of stuff, but going from like going from background to Hello Bastards, like, did you guys realize what a drastic change and I mean, you can hear the like some songs and backgrounds that transition, they can kind of match Hello Bastards, I think more of like a B-sides, but like Hello Bastards, I think you guys like really had established like more of a concrete sound.
The piece you have to pay attention to there in terms of like the transition is that we put out our own 7-inch after background with the new lineup. We put out a 7-inch called Tinnitus that we did on Ari's label, which he'd started doing just to put that out. And that was really like where you can hear the transition from background to Hello Bastards.
Was there like a kind of a conversation that you guys had where you were, or just like, was there like, hey, we should change this up a little bit, or it just progressed when you guys were writing songs? Like, hey, check this out, I got this new style, I got this new. It seems a little bit different.
There were so many conversations and like frustrating transition points where like Ari was like frustrated with where we were going. He at some point was like, I don't want to write fast songs anymore.
Oh wow.
But he had something in mind that he was more like feeling more influenced by at the moment, but we were not, we were young and we were not great at communicating with each other. I didn't know what he was looking for when he said, I don't want to do fast songs anymore. I kind of I started moving. There's a whole bunch of songs we wrote at that point that we never recorded, that we scrapped. So I interpreted that as a more like, okay, like Sam I Am.
Yeah.
Sam I Am is like a melodic band where the guitarists are doing cool stuff and it's not fast. But he was thinking more like the Adolescents and Peg Boy. But he didn't like explain that to me. When we butted heads, we did not communicate well. So I was just like, all right, well, I love this band. I'll just start writing stuff that isn't fast, but it wasn't. And he wrote music, he wrote words and vocal salt. We played those songs live, but once we kind of got on the same page, and then the issue wasn't really speed, it was like style. and I learned to kind of strip things back down to like 7 seconds, Minor Threat, Dag Nasty maybe. Stop trying to be too many things at once. And basically I learned how to write songs to what Ari's voice could do. And he was learning what his voice could do, because he didn't know how to, he'd never sung a note when we started playing. Like, the reason we don't play anything off background is that he hates everything he's saying on it.
Well, he was like more singing, like he was holding notes out way low. That was the first thing when I heard background. We were on tour in like '97, and my buddy was like, "Oh, have you heard old Lifetime stuff?" I was like, "What are you talking about? Hello
Yeah,
Bastards is it?" He's like, "No, check this out." And he played background, and I think he had 7 inches. And I'm listening to it, I'm like, this is so different. And like he's like singing, he's like holding notes out. But when it came
yeah,
to Hello Bastards, it was like airtight.
yeah. So he got good at like his like kind of wild singing, screaming, wild style thing, like where he, and the thing that made it really like, I started to realize is that he sings like a drummer. The like when he sings, when he's doing like a lot of like singing fast, he's singing like the syncopation is all like, he'll like lock in with the snare on the upbeat, or
Yeah, you're
like,
right.
like it's the way he sings. The best way to describe it
His
is the way he,
tempo.
that when he found not his tempo, the style, his cadence is percussive. It's really percussive. It's like, listen to the, so the 7 inches thing, which is, that's like, it was like a CD we put out with the first 7 inch and then the tinnitus 7 inch. That's really where, and that stuff is now out. It's released on like, J Tree did a thing called Somewhere in the Swamps of Jersey that was like
Oh yeah, I bought it years
all
ago.
the things that aren't on the album. So
Yeah.
the first 5 songs on that are the tinnitus 7 inch, and that's really where you can hear the shift into what would become Hello Bastards. And for me, it was like Star 69 was the song where I was like, oh man, we finally figured it out. Like, I wrote this song, and like we figured the drums were really fucking wild, and it was cool. And like, I had no idea what Ari was singing, because like, he would like, in practice, it's hard to tell. I remember one day we kind of finished that song, and I was walking, I was late to practice, and I was walking up to this house in New Brunswick where we practiced, and I heard them playing the song Star 69. I heard the vocals for the first time, and I was like, froze. I was like, I'm just gonna stand out here and listen, because I was like, that's it. That's like, wow, like we got there. 4 years of fussing and tug of war and trying to figure out our identity, and I was like, damn, we finally can write a song that's like everything I imagined, and I can write to Ari's voice, and Ari can sing to my, instead of, we were working against each other a lot of times up until then, because we had different ideas in our heads of what we wanted to be.
Did you see that though? Because like I noticed it. My favorite Lifetime album is Jersey's Best Dancers, and I know people have argued with me like Hello Bastard. I mean, they're both great, but Jersey's Best Dancers I thought was fucking flawless. Like, and also real quick, like Somewhere in the Swamps of New Jersey, Swamps of Jersey, I think is like one of the greatest songs you guys wrote, and I was really upset. You guys like you never played like you definitely didn't play it in 2005, but was that done during Hello
We
Bastard?
have played it since then.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
fucking
that was
amazing.
done.
It's such a great
That
song.
No, that was done when we were recording Jersey's Best,
That's what I thought. Yeah, it sounded like it was at the same.
because we recorded that in two sittings. We recorded half of it before we went on tour, and we wanted to do a single, so we released a single that was just a 45 like RPM 7 inch, with like old style, like singles used to be when our parents were kids,
Yeah.
like an A side and a B side, and Boys No Good was the A side, and then Swamps was the B side.
Yeah, I've got that 7 inch still.
And the lyric sheets didn't get done in time, so we had to like say like, send a stamped self-addressed envelope, and we'll send you the lyric sheet. And then Ari just made the lyric sheets like at Kinko's.
Holy shit, really?
Yeah.
Did he send them all out?
No, some of them, but we were never that great on follow through. Our intentions were good though.
Did you realize though, like, you said you figured it out, like when you went from Hello Bastards into Jersey's Best Dancer, did you kind of just see how you guys were like what you thought in that moment when you heard Star 69, you're going like, wow, we figured this out. So you're just watching these albums get created. We're like, we're just creating this. We're locked in this whole time. Well, you're like, Jesus Christ, we got this. This is exactly what I wanted it to be.
No, I think it was a lot. I think there was still always this constant, like, God, I hope what we're doing doesn't suck.
It's amazing.
Like, there were moments where I was like, oh God, we just like nailed it perfectly, what we are and what we're trying to be. But then there were a lot of times where we're just like, God, I hope this is not a bad idea.
Well, it's funny because I'm watching videos. You can go on YouTube and put like Lifetime Band 1996, and I'm watching you guys play like Young, Loud, and Scotty, or Christ, I mean, like any song off of. It's like a mixture of Jersey Best Dancers and Hello Bastards, and the whole crowd is just sitting there with their arms folded in front of you. And I mean, I heard about you guys after you had broken up, and that's when I got Jersey's Best Dancer, and I was like, what the fuck? Why are these guys not doing this anymore? But I can feel that, but from so many years of doing that, and then putting out Jersey's Best Dancers as your last album before putting out, later on the self-titled release, like when
Uh-huh.
they're just sitting there with their arms folded in front of you, where you're like, fuck, man, like this, like fuck this, like no one's, we're
That
not.
was the 90s, man. I mean, there was two things going on there. One is there was no in 1996 there was no other band. Like, I'm not trying to this is I hope this doesn't come off as like arrogant. It's but I'm not saying that like we were the first or anything like that, but there was no other band like us. Like,
No.
there was no other hardcore band that was like totally hardcore but totally melodic. And there was no pop punk band that played fast and ferocious.
Yeah,
So
100%.
people didn't know what the fuck to make of it. Even people that were like fans. It's just like people didn't know what they were supposed to do. And then the other thing is we'd become much more aligned with like the more political scene in the 90s, like sort of the DIY scene that kind of built up around ABC No Rio, that club in New York, and like there was a lot of and then a lot of just like DIY stuff, and there was a lot of what do you call it? Like backlash against, for lack of a better word, like ritualized aggression at shows. Like
Hmm.
people were like, why, like there's not like this code of behavior where we jump on each other and punch each other and kick each other. And moshing had gotten really dumb and violent by then. It was like it basically looked like kickboxing. We're like, why do we do this? Like, there's a lot of in that scene. There was a lot of questioning of the rituals that we took for granted. So there's like a lot of backlash against like aggressive behavior at shows. Um, and so like there's that influence that was in play as well. But we were also like really frustrated that in a lot of like cities, people didn't really know what. I'm like, well, there's like 400 people here, so they must be into it, but like they don't seem that excited. And that was like really frustrating. And there were the exceptions to that were like shows in Philly were awesome, and shows in like New Brunswick and like the surrounding area were usually awesome. But a lot of times we'd go on tour and it would be like people didn't know what they were allowed to do.
Well, it's like when you guys broke up, I remember my buddy Bob, he went to your show at the truck in Philly, and he's like, it was fucking sick. He goes, but they played before the Bouncing Souls. And I
Yeah.
just thought that was like kind of ironic to the run you guys had before you got back together in 2005. And I think like you finally got to get that thing to happen in front of you, what you wanted. But I thought it was just ironic where your last show was opening, like it wasn't even like the headlining spot.
Yeah. I mean, the Bouncing Souls were a bigger band.
Right. But it was just like weird that your last show was like that.
We were also plagued by insecurity and self doubt. So even if we had been offered to headline that show, we would have been like, nope,
Really?
I don't want to be playing at a 1,200 capacity theater and then have half the people leave right before we play.
Did you find that when you got back together in 2005? Because when I saw you guys at Asbury, the Souls opened. It was like Level, as I said, then the Souls, and then you guys. Who brought that up to be like, hey man, we're playing. Like, who called who and said, can you open or can we open?
Oh, when we got back together?
Yeah, in 2005. I'm kind of jumping around.
Um, no, it's okay. I mean, the Bouncing Souls are good friends of ours, so I think they just wanted to play, and they weren't gonna headline over us under those circumstances, because it was just supposed to be a one-time thing.
Yeah.
That weekend we played 3 shows, and it was supposed to be over. So the Souls wanted to be involved. They went on their very first tour with us. Like, we're the first people to bring them off the East Coast.
Wow.
And then they ended up being this huge band, but like, so clearly they wanted to play, but they weren't going to try to, like, I think by then we realized that we should be headlining. But in 1997, when we were breaking up, we're like, oh God, if we play over the Souls, everyone's going to leave when they're done.
Did you guys feel like you got the reaction at that show, the one in '97, where like when the people were like going off and you're like, was that like, is everyone giving that energy that you wanted to, where you're playing and going,
Well,
shit, did we make a mistake?
I got to be honest with you. I don't remember that show at all because that wasn't really our last show. We played. Um, I don't remember if it was the same weekend or the same week, but we played at the Melody. Was our actual last show
Oh, that's
in
right.
New
Yes.
Brunswick, and we ended up being, just to give you an idea of how we had no idea whether anyone would care. That place holds like 250 people legally. We get there and there's a line like half a mile down the street. We're like, fuck. So we just like, all right, well, we'll play twice. We did 2 shows, like an early show and a later show, and that was crazy. That was when I was like, oh, this is the reaction that we've been sort of been waiting for. But it took us breaking up for people to be like, oh, let's pull out all the stops when this band plays.
Yeah. I definitely want to say in Lifetime, but I definitely want to dip into Dynamite because when you started that, so Lifetime breaks up and you guys leave everyone with Jersey's Best Dancers. Don't really, I mean, did you get to really tour on that at all?
No, Jersey's Best came out after we broke up.
But you played the songs though, because there's videos of you guys incorporating that into your
Yeah,
set
yeah.
list.
I mean, the songs weren't new. Like, I mean, when you write a record, like, by the time you record it and mix it, and by the time you're done writing it, recording it, mixing it, and the vinyl and everything, and doing the art, and then it actually comes out. A band never stops writing.
Yeah.
Maybe now that they're like careerists, they do this shit where like they do an album and then they do a touring cycle, quote unquote, that lasts like 2 years, and then they take time off and write a new record. But like, we just like, you know, practice twice a week, no matter what we were doing. And if we were on tour, we had, we were like, so I mean, we were writing Jersey's Best Dancers since we finished Hello Bastards. So you got to think some of those songs had been written. I'm trying to think what the first songs were I mean, some of the songs had been written since 1995.
Damn. So because you guys recorded in '97 that album, right? Or it was
No,
released in
no, no.
'97?
It came out in 97. We recorded it in 2 different stages in 1996.
So did you find when you started Kid Dynamite at that time, and it was like it was pretty fast when Lifetime broke up, and then Kid Dynamite, you guys got together.
Yeah, because I was fucking pissed off. Like, I didn't want to break up Lifetime. Like, I'm not the one who quit. So like, I was like, fuck this shit. Like, the rug was just pulled out from under me. I was in grad school too. I was like, if I stop now, like if I take a break now, who knows what's gonna happen. I was pissed, so pissed. Also, I had just taken a year leave of absence from grad school to tour full time with Lifetime, and then like 4 months into that, we broke up. So I was like, fuck this shit. And I started writing Kid Dynamite songs like basically as soon as I got home from that tour, that last Lifetime tour.
What was your vision with that when you started doing that? You're like it seems like you headed up because you were like, fuck this, I want to have control over it. And so it seemed like you were going, all right, I'm gonna structure this the way that I want it to be.
Yeah, there's a lot more of and that ended up being its undoing because I was like too clinical in the way I approached it. Like, I'm gonna control the structure. and what it's like. And, I just wanted to be able to do, I wanted to be able to do the kind of stuff we were doing in Lifetime, but also do stuff that was more like brutal and aggressive. So I wanted somebody that could sing, but could also really scream, like with straight up no melody at all. I met Steve first, the first bass player, and then met a couple drummers, but then Dave Wagenschutz, who had been in Lifetime from like 91 through 94. He played on background and on Tinnitus, Tinnitus 7-inch. He lived in Philly by then. I was in Philly too, and he heard I was doing this, and we were not really on great. We were friendly, but we weren't on great terms after he left Lifetime.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and but then he had done Ink and Dagger, which was like the best band to ever come out of Philly. So I really feel like he had taken a step up from Lifetime. And then he heard I was doing something new and he wanted to do it. And I was like, yeah, let's like hang out and see if we're like compatible. Then we're practicing like twice a week and trying out singers.
Yeah, that's the funny thing about watching the documentary because you guys had that. I remember hearing about the demo tape going around, and then watching the documentary, it's like you guys had tried all these singers. Like, which owner, co-owner, or what am I
Oh,
trying?
Darren
Darren.
Walters tried out. Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny like watching that, and then like Jason comes in. It was just crazy because you guys just had a demo tape going around. It was just music, just trying to find
Yeah, it
everybody.
wasn't, it wasn't going around. It was just like we had it. And anyone who said they wanted to try out, we gave it to them. It wasn't like we gave it to anybody else.
Yeah, because I hit my friend Bob, who was at the Lifetime show I mentioned earlier at the Truck, and I was like, "Hey man, I'm going to talk to Dan. What would you want to know?" And the one thing he asked, he's like, I want to ask about the practice regimen." And I was like, "What do you mean?" He said, "Yeah, I heard that they were really big into practicing for hours, multiple times a week." So I feel like that
Yes.
kind of goes along with what you said about you went like too hard.
Well, no, that part was good. It was how much control I wanted to have over how it came out that was bad. I think that's why we didn't last that long.
So you guys are all down with just being like, let's get as tight as possible.
Yeah, totally.
That's sick.
And we practiced in Dave's apartment on the third floor of a building on South Street, like right above a bar, like two floors above a bar or a restaurant or something like that. We like had all our gear in there, and we would like come to practice, move all the furniture into the corners, move the gear into the room, practice. And like, by then it was like Lifetime got really big right when we broke up. And so like people, and we were as popular in Philly as we were anywhere, probably more so than anywhere. And people knew that we were working on something new. And I hear all these stories from kids I know, who are now not kids, but where they're like, people would like hear us practicing and just like stand in a parking lot on South Street and like listen.
Really?
Yeah, like before we had a singer even. Just like, oh shit, that's what Dan and Dave were doing. Like
That's amazing.
that's what people told me at least. And then Jason, basically as soon as we heard Jason, we knew he was the guy.
It was such a difference from Lifetime, but it like you could see where the bridge was between the two bands. There was something that was like they were definitely different, but there was something about I think it's just your style of writing. And it was also like you what's your all your songs that you write are like super short. Is there like a myth? Is there a reason for that?
I just thought it was cool to write short songs.
The majority of our albums are like 22 minutes long or something like that. But there's like 18 songs.
I really love the idea of writing a song that had a verse and a chorus and a resolution, and it was over in 20 seconds. Like, yeah, so we are into two things. We are into like songcraft, but also like economy of scale. Just like nothing bloated, just like no longer or no longer than it had to be. Like just because the chorus is catchy doesn't mean we have to play it for 2 minutes.
I know, and that's what killed me.
As a matter of fact, maybe we won't even repeat the chorus. Maybe we'll just play it once.
It just like ends. You're like, wait, what?
Yeah, not because I wanted like any particular reaction, not because I was like I have this idea of leaving people wanting more, but just being like the thing that was so exciting about the first Bad Brains record is it's just stripped down. Like there's no extra.
That'd be hilarious if I just like ended the episode right there. Just like cut out. When Shorter, Faster, Louder came out, that came out after you. Was that when you guys had already
Again,
decided to break up?
again, after we broke up.
God
Yeah,
damn, man.
yeah. So you're seeing a pattern here, right?
Well, it's funny because I remember when you put Painted Black together. When was that? Like 2000,
2001.
2001. I remember reading an article that you wrote, and you were like, "Fuck this. I'm gonna sing because I don't want this shit falling apart, and I want to be able to
Right.
just, yeah." I feel like it made so much sense.
If you quit, I'll replace you. That was the main ethic of that band. But but if I'm going to be real here, which is the point of all this, I'm probably not really easy to work with. There's maybe a reason why Lifetime and Kid Dynamite both broke up before our last record came out after we broke up. Like, I'm probably not easy to work with. And then in Kid Dynamite, it was me and Dave Wagon Shoots. You got two control freaks in one band. That's a, a recipe for disaster. And I love Dave, but he and I are both control freaks when it comes to bands. I, I'm a psychologist, and the fact that I didn't see that coming is appalling to me.
Well, it's amazing too because you were studying this while you were
Yeah,
managing both, like balancing the bands.
yeah. But psychologists are famous for not being able to apply their craft in their personal life.
This is kind of a stretch, but when you were in the band and the vans, you guys were having arguments or think discussions. Did you find you were applying that shit? And they were like, "Dude, don't pull that crap on me."
No, no, no. I was just lost in it. I was miserable.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, not always on. When we were fighting, I was just like, "Fuck!" Like, I don't know what to do. I just felt helpless and frustrated and not understood. And yeah, I was just lost in it.
Did you feel relieved though then when Kid Dynamite broke up and then you started Painted Black?
Relieved? No, I was really distraught when Kid Dynamite broke up.
Was it more so then than when Lifetime broke up?
Yeah, because it was like, wow, again, really, really? How did this happen twice, basically in like a 2.5 year period? And both times we had tours booked that I had to then call people up and cancel.
Damn.
So yeah, but it all works out because like my friendships with all of those people are intact, and like both those bands got to play again for like as much as we wanted. And Kid Dynamite, we decided it wasn't meant to continue on, but Lifetime's still a band, so
Yeah, I remember talking to Scotty or Scott. I just call him Scotty because you guys would say that in the album. But I remember talking to him after the Asbury show, and I walked up to him. I was just like, "Dude," I was like hammered. I was like, "Dude, thank you so much for playing. This was like one of the greatest nights." I mean, there was like, what was it, like the dudes from My Chemical Romance were there, like the guys from Thursday, like Adam from Take Backs, like all these, like everyone showed up for this thing, and it was just like such a fucking party. And I walked up to him. I was like, "Dude, thank you so much for this." Like, I don't know. He was like, I was like, "You ever gonna play again?" And he kind of gave me this look. He looked at his, I think it was his wife, and he just kind of smiled. He's like, "Yeah." He's like, "There's something might happen." And it was like a year later, you guys put out the full length on.
yeah.
Is it Decadence or Decadence? I don't know how he says that.
I don't know. I have no idea.
Cool, cool, man. Well, I don't want to keep you on any longer because I know you gotta.
Do you have any other burning questions
I
before I get
do.
off
I
the
mean,
phone?
I could talk for fucking hours, but I want to be respectful of your time. But I mean,
Yeah, hit me with one more.
well, I've got two that I end with, but like when you played all the reunion shows, like was it as just equally fulfilling for both sides from Kid Dynamite and Lifetime when you guys came back after years and played those shows and you're like just got that energy? Like, was it as fulfilling?
No, for Lifetime, it was much more magical.
Really?
Because Kid Dynamite was big almost immediately. But it's like Kid Dynamite, I vouch for and love those people, and I'm proud of those records. But most rebound relationships don't work out too well because you're dealing with ghosts more than as much as you're dealing with people. And so Kid Dynamite was like a rebound relationship for me, which doesn't lessen it in terms of like what it like the role it had in my life. or the the power of the music. But with Lifetime, there was this thing like people, like the rest of the punk scene was figuring out how we made sense in the scope of like what they were into, and we were just sort of maybe seeing like 7 years of work bear fruit in a way that was consistent. And then it just was done. And then 10 years later we play again. People were just really excited, and it was thrilling. With Kid Dynamite playing again, it was like different. It was more like reconnecting with an old lover, but it wasn't like this. It wasn't as redemptive as when Lifetime started playing again.
There's something about that Lifetime show that I went to. I mean, I don't, because you guys have done multiple shows since then, and I'm sure is either it's sustained, or there might be a point where you're like, okay, this is like, we should probably take a break again, because this is like maybe not as I mean, I don't want to say it's not as exciting, but I'm sure it's probably
No,
badass every time.
we still do it. I think there were a couple of years where we barely did anything, but or where we mostly did festivals because it's easy. Like somebody offers you a bunch of money and takes care of the plane tickets, and so it's easy to sort of. We don't live anywhere near each other, so it's the logistics of practicing is really hard. But playing festivals sucks. It's like really alienating. It's not cool. There's not really anything cool about it. So a couple of years ago, we just decided we're just going to do our own shows, with a rare exception if there's something really cool. But like, so like last year we played, like Friday, we played just like 3 months ago, we did what was it? Philly, Boston, Asbury Park.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then a year, like pretty much exactly a year before that, we did DC, Asbury Park, and New York. And we're putting stuff together for later this year for the West Coast and for New York as well. It's been like reliably fun, basically, but way more fun when we do our own thing. Like we're setting up the show, we're picking the venue, we're picking the bands. That's always much better.
Well, cool, man. Well, it was funny. I had one question where I was going to ask you if you had a choice to play with any band this weekend, which would it be? But it sounds like it would have been like probably Lifetime.
This weekend?
It was like if you out of the three bands you had, if you had like this weekend, like you had to play a show with your favorite out of the three bands,
It would
what would it be?
it would probably be Painted Black, because that's the thing that's right now that's hardest to get together.
Oh, okay.
Right now, 3/4 of Painted Black live in Los Angeles, and our drummer is a session musician, and he, plays drums for a living for various people, and he is never available. Like we got him for 2 days in all of 2019, and we spent it writing, working on new stuff. We haven't played a show since August 2018. So with Lifetime, it's like logistics are hard in terms of rehearsing, but like if we want to play a show, we just sort of open the group text and say, let's do something.
All right, man. Two more questions. One, what do you want to plug? It could be for you or it could be for someone else, whatever it is.
I don't really want to plug anything.
Okay.
But you know what? Actually, this is I will do this. My newer band, my fourth band, third really, because Kid Dynamite's not a band now, but Open City is a band I play guitar in. Put out an LP like 3 years ago. We rarely play also because everybody's got a lot of stuff going on, but that's a really cool and fun project. And I just finished recording the guitar for our second album, and Rachel's going to start the vocals soon. And that record will be out sometime later this year, and I want to plug that. Band's called Open City. It's me on guitar, Andy Nelson, who's the bass player from Painted Black, on bass, Chris Wilson, who plays drums in Ted Leo and the Pharmacists, and Titus Andronicus, another Jersey band, and then Rachel Rubino, who played guitar and sang in Bridge and Tunnel and a bunch of other Long Island bands. And it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's on Spotify too. So everyone wants to check that out. And all right, last question. I'll let you go. What scene ethics do you hold on to this day?
Uh, I mean, well, DIY as much as possible. Veganism, definitely. And just treat each other with respect. It's a community, and that's more important than anything else.